got depressed, and I just thought I wanted to end my life to put an end to all that pain. Suddenly, without any warning, God took me out of my body to a place between the heavens and the earth. And I realized God was looking at me. But as he's looking at me, I could feel this love. It was just radiating off of him. He showed me a woven tapestry, and I realized that the tapestry represented his plan. Well, he showed me my thread, and it was sticking out of the tapestry. So I was at a turning point where I had to decide if I wanted to be a part of the plan.
Warning, ignorance isn't protection, it's deception. There's a war happening right now, beyond what your eye can see. The enemy is after your mind, your home, and your destiny. But the one who speaks truth is calling you higher. This is God's Voice Daily, where the supernatural gets real. And here is today's featured episode. Enjoy. Kelly, welcome to God's Voice Daily. You had an encounter where you left your body, you saw the universe being shaped by God, and felt his love so strongly that it changed your decision to end your life. So, Kelly, tell me more. What happened?
Good morning, Vladimir. Thank you for having me today. I am going to share my story. It's the first time I've ever shared it with anyone. I've always been a little reluctant because I didn't think people would be open to it. And I didn't want to have to go through all this ridicule and everything because people just don't have those sort of experiences. But as I've aged, this experience happened to me when I was about 17 to 20 years old. And I looked at things very differently then than I do now. I'm now 60-ish, I will say. I now am seeing that there are more spiritual things going on with the world that I never knew about, particularly in the negative. Whereas before I was brought up in the church as a Baptist and I was baptized, so I always believed in God and things like that. But I didn't know about spiritual oppression or how evil things could be at that time. So to set this up, I'm here because I am probably the definition of a lukewarm Christian. I don't have like a huge happy ending. I'm a normal person. I've lived my life. I have struggles just like everybody else. I'm not someone who's ever been involved with, drugs or wild things. I'm just a normal person. So just like a lot of people going down the road of life. However, in the last few years, I've been getting closer to God and reading the Bible more. I've been trying to live a moral life and live with his commandments. And I've decided that I'd rather be the salt and the light and not be just a lukewarm Christian. I would rather him say, "Well done, my faithful servant," than spit me out of his mouth because I am lukewarm. So I'm trying to do some corrections. And I've been listening to your podcast, and I thought some of the stories were similar to mine, and each one had details and things that were also very different from mine. But I thought maybe this is the time to share it. As the world gets more evil, I'm also seeing more of a spiritual awakening. So maybe people would be more open to it now than they were. And I'm going to set this up in a couple different ways before we get into the meat of the story. One is that when I was listening to one of your podcasts, I was walking on a strip mall sidewalk. As my mom was getting her hair done, I was just trying to get some steps in. And I had just finished listening to one of your podcasts. And I was scrolling through, looking for another thing to listen to. And as I was doing that, I said to myself, I need to just sign up for this and do it. It's one of those things you just need to leap in and do it. So I made my decision right then and there to sign up for the podcast. And I kid you not 10 seconds later, I'm reaching the end of the sidewalk. A man comes around the corner. He's a well-dressed man. He's probably 60-ish, 58, somewhere around there. Dressed neat as a pin. And I just kind of noticed him, and I go back to scrolling, and he's walking the opposite direction. And as he passes by, he suddenly lunges at me, comes right up to my ear, and screams this demonic yell right in my ear. Whoa. And for no reason. This was literally 10 seconds after I decided to do this, and I kind of jumped back, and I was startled. And then I kind of looked at him and just reactively, I just said, grow up. And I kept walking. And I said, really? Grow up. And I kept walking, and I took a couple steps. And then I was a little bit outraged. I thought to myself, that voice was not normal. It's not a voice that I could even replicate. It was so loud, the frequencies of it, I was like, that was a demonic scream in my ear. And I thought, something really did not like it, that I made the decision to be on this podcast. So I turned around, and I was in my head. I was like, I'm a child of God. I don't deserve this, right? So I turn around, and in my head, I'm thinking, not today, Satan. And I walk up to the man slowly, and he turns around, and he's looking at me. He's about 6 feet tall. And I'm thinking in my head, as I'm walking, I'm not saying anything. He's not saying anything. But I'm thinking in my head, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy sword and thy staff comfort me. And I'm looking in his eyes. His eyes are cold and kind of dead. I'm looking in his eyes, and I'm thinking in my head, get behind me, Satan. I'm a child of God who is authorized to walk on serpents and scorpions. I'm covered in the blood of Christ, and I wear the full armor of God. Get behind me, Satan. It is done. It is done. And I'm saying it is done because, and again, these are things that I've learned in the last couple of years, and I didn't realize it, but it's done because Christ died on the cross, and his blood covers us, and the battle is really already won. It's going to be it's already determined. The ending is determined. So, and I don't know why I did this. This is not, I normally wouldn't do something like that. I would just keep walking. But I'm just looking at his eyes, and he just kind of slowly turns, and he goes into the Chinese restaurant behind him. It was kind of a takeout place. And he's looking at the menu to order his Chinese food and take out. And no one came. There were people, it's like no one else heard, or they didn't want to. But it just, to me, I just turned and went on my walk, and I was like, it was a sign to me that it needed to be done, that something didn't want me to share this story. I don't know why, but something didn't, and it was not happy about it. And at 3 a.m. that night, I went to sleep. At 3 a.m., I'm in my bedroom, asleep. My TV turns on all by itself. And I'm thinking, yeah, something doesn't want me to share this. So I get up and turn the TV off. I was like, something is not happy. So I get up and turn the TV off, and I kind of cast everything out in my mind and kind of say the same things in my mind. I go back to sleep. And there were some other things that happened too, but that was the big thing. I couldn't believe it 10 seconds after I decided to do this, that this experience happened to me. So I guess the other big thing that, to set this up, is that when I was a child, when I was about 2.5, I started experiencing seizures. And I had a lot of seizures from the time I was 2.5 to 5. And I can remember, looking back, that my parents said, you could have died, your heart could have stopped or something. But I never did, okay? But it was very serious. And I remember at the beginning, when I first started having the seizures, I remember somehow I got transported to another place. And I was sitting in a big meadow, and I knew I was having a seizure back on earth, my body was, but I was somewhere in a big meadow with all these plants and flowers, and it was like the light was so beautiful, and it was calm and serene. I didn't know how I got there, but I was kind of sitting there looking around, and all of a sudden I see this man. He's at the edge of the meadow, and he kind of comes and he walks up to me. He's dressed in kind of like 1850s to 1900s style clothes and a suit kind of thing. And I don't know who he is, but he just comes up and he says, I've been sent to stay with you while you are here. You're safe and you're going to be okay. Okay, and I was very young, and I'm used to having like an adult supervise me, so I just accepted what he said. He's here to, keep an eye on me. kind of thing. I guess it's like the faith of a child. I just took what he said. I didn't question. And so as I would have a seizure from that time forward, I sometimes would go to that place and he would be there. And we would have, conversations, child conversations. Now we were playing games and jacks, and he taught me just how to dribble basketball, things like that. Nothing deep or anything, but I accepted that there was another place, and I thought he was an angel or an ancestor angel, someone in my family who was just supervising me. I didn't question it, okay, because I was so young. And as I aged, probably by the time I was about 12, as I said, I had most of those seizures from 2.5 to 5, but by the time I was 12, I didn't have those seizures anymore. And I didn't have those experiences anymore. And I kind of just slowly, went on with my life. And again, I was a Baptist. I was baptized, believed in God. So now we're going to forward to, now I was about 17 to 20 years old. And I don't remember exactly because it was so long ago, I didn't write it down. But I was going to university. I was paying my way through university because we didn't have any money. And I had to pay my way through the university, and I wanted to go to the university. So I was working full time as a waitress and also going to the university full time. But I also had a boyfriend, and he was very emotionally and psychologically abusive to me. And I had a little bit of a rough childhood, so I accepted too many things that now, if someone tried to do that to me now, I would know it was abusive and just get rid of them. But I didn't know that back then. And, it was telling me how ugly I was and, how I wasn't worth anything. And I accepted those things, but it was really hurting me inside. And so I got depressed and I was hopeless. And I just thought I wanted to end my life to put an end to all that pain. It wasn't that I wanted to not be alive. I would have liked to have been alive if I didn't have to go through all that. And I just couldn't see a way out of it. And I couldn't make it stop. And it was just this constant pain. So, and I had lack of self-esteem, and it didn't help that I was working so much and going to school so much. So I could be exhausted at times, certain times of the semester. So I just really wanted the pain to stop. And I was obsessed with a way to try and figure out a way to do it that it wouldn't hurt my parents, my mom. My parents were divorced, so it was really my mom. I did not want to bring that on her. In fact, she doesn't know the story today. Wow. It would greatly disturb her to know of this today. So I was upstairs in my bedroom, lying on my bed. It's 9 p.m. I'm young. There's no way I could be asleep. I wasn't asleep. And I was just contemplating how I could do this. Could I fall off a cliff? Could I drive my car into a tree? I'd picked a tree out. I was like, oh yeah, that's a tree that people do have that happen. But I also thought, I really don't want to do that because it's against the laws of God, but I don't want to, I just can't experience this pain anymore. So the other thing I was thinking is that why couldn't God just take me? I had those seizures when I was little. He could give me seizures again and just make my heart stop beating, and then I wouldn't have to do this. Or he could just make me have a heart attack or something. So in a way, it's blasphemous. I didn't think about it like that. That I actually thought, why couldn't God just help me out and do this and help me? And it's funny. When you're young, your thoughts are not the same when you're that young. And I now kind of see that as I think that was some spiritual oppression that was going on. Mm-hmm. And, not in addition to the circumstances where I was exhausted from trying to handle everything myself and the boyfriend. But I also think there might have been something else going on. Had no idea of that back then. Wouldn't have even thought of it. So while I was laying there on the bed, I was thinking about how calm and relaxing and peaceful it would be once I was in the ground, okay, after I had done it. And I'm thinking, I know it's crazy, isn't it? But I was thinking that I wouldn't have to deal with this anymore. I could just relax. And I was just thinking about the quiet. It would be a constant, I wouldn't be worried about anything. Then suddenly, without any warning, God took me out of my body in spirit form to a place between the heaven and the earth and showed me the universe. We traveled inconceivable distances at a huge speeds. And he took me throughout the galaxies and the universes, and he was showing me. We weren't talking. He was just showing me the different galaxies, planets, suns, and so quickly, it was in a flash and a blur, but I had impressions of it, and I could see heaven off in the distance as like a huge golden city, and I could see that there were beings, people in the angels in the city. I couldn't see details, but I could see people that were living there, going about their business. And it was like a brilliant light. And we went by there. We didn't stop, but we kept going. And we saw everything. And it was all part of his plan that he had designed. And I was like, I didn't really think about that before. I just thought, the Big Bang, everything was there. But no, it wasn't. It was designed with intent and purpose. While that was going on, my consciousness expanded, and I instantly knew everything. And all my questions that I had, I was very introspective and, wanting to know how things worked and everything. But all my questions were suddenly answered. I just knew the answers to them. And everything made sense in ways that I didn't even have to ask the questions. I just do it. And I could see the complexity of the universe, but yet how simple and how perfect the design was, how elegant it was. And it wasn't that I necessarily learned everything I knew. I felt like I was home again, and that a veil had been lifted, and that it had been restored to me in a way. Okay, so it wasn't like it wasn't like a download of information. It was like, okay, now you can see it. So I could see that he shaped the past and the present and the future, and that he had a plan, and that everything was alive. Like when I would see the trees and my vision was different. Okay, so I could focus in, like zoom in and see down to like molecules and see minute detail, or zoom out and look at the plan in general. And so everything was alive, the plants, the animals, everything had a life in it, a light and a color, and the love of God in it. And so to me, I could also see that the plan was still in progress, that he was still working on it. And you think of it, he's got his plan, you think it's done, but it isn't. So then, after we finished kind of our tour of the universe, again, we weren't speaking to each other. We were just going through, and I was having impressions and that sort of thing. Then as we finished, we came back to planet Earth, and we stopped in space looking down upon the planet. And it was very tranquil and peaceful. And I realized God was looking at me. Just as we're standing there looking at the earth, I look over, and there he is, he's looking at me. And he was fit and muscular. He was tall. He had a white robe on and with a rope tie, and he had leather sandals on his feet. And he had like shoulder length gray wavy hair. I couldn't see the features of his face. There was this light that came from his face, and so I really couldn't see the features of it, but it was this bright light, and this light emanated from all of him. But particularly when I tried to look at his face, sometimes I felt I could see some faint shadows of features, but really I couldn't see his face due to the light. But as he's looking at me, I could feel this love. It was just radiating off of him, just huge amounts of love. And he's looking at me, and of course, I'm thinking, I couldn't believe it. I could feel it. I couldn't believe it. I could feel like this warm embrace almost, but I couldn't believe it. So I looked to my left and right. I'm thinking, it couldn't be me. And I'm look back at God, and I think in my head, who, me? Are you looking at me? And I'm thinking it. The thoughts are, I'm thinking it. I'm not saying it. But it was kind of funny because it was like, who, me? You know, God's looking at me. And I felt him affirm that it was me he was looking at. And he was smiling at me in love. But he was also a little amused, like, you know, like you're looking at a child who just said something a little funny. You know, it was kind of like, of course I'm looking at you. But to me, it felt strange because I just thought he wouldn't be looking at me like that with all that love. He's got to be looking at somebody else. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? It was kind of funny. But, you know, at that time, I felt he was treating me like a young daughter. His love was pure and forgiving and full of grace. And he was proud kind of to see me after a long separation. And my biological father on earth, my parents divorced he left when I was 7. So I didn't really have that feeling of what it was to have a father who loved me like that. And that was the first time I really understood what a father's love would feel like. Now, maybe that's a bit of a misnomer because my dad's love could not feel, even if he did love me like that, it couldn't feel the same because God's love was so big and encompassing, right? But I also felt he was a little stern with me, like he had brought me here and was having to show me this to give me kind of a gentle correction, you know, because my thoughts about hurting myself were not to his plan and that I was a part of him and I shouldn't be thinking those thoughts. And he was maybe a little disappointed that, you know, I believed in God and yet here I was thinking those. But he wanted us all as part of his eternal family. And so he was taking this step as maybe a gentle course correction. So, and okay, he spoke in, then he was speaking to me, and he spoke in thoughts and feelings. He never spoke verbally. It was all like telepathy, but more because it was an instant knowing plus all the feelings that were involved. So I could literally feel the way he felt. And he was so calm and gentle and peaceful, but also strong. I was like, it was amazing how peaceful he was. You don't think about that in the Bible. You think about the Old Testament. He's kind of, you know, a little mad at us and doing some things. But this God was gentle, very gentle and peaceful. And you see that more in the New Testament, but you don't get the scope of it really. But I also knew he was not to be taken lightly, that he meant business. And I needed to listen to him. And then I realized, as I was standing there thinking all these things, all of a sudden I thought, oh no, he knows everything about me. He can hear my thoughts right now. He knows what I'm thinking, and he knows everything, the good, the bad, the ugly. So I felt really, everything was open to him that I had done in my life. And then I thought, oh, this is where he's going to smite me because I could just feel how much sin I had compared with him. And I'm kind of waiting. I'm looking at him. I'm like, oh, this is where he's going to smite me. And of course he doesn't, you know. And I kind of get that feeling again. He's looking at me a little bemused, like, no, I'm not going to smite you kind of thing. But he was so clean. I mean, that goes to like when you're that young, right? Sometimes I think he was so powerful too. I was so clean. He was so clean and holy and pure. And I felt really dirty, even though I was in general, you know, I wasn't someone who got in trouble. I wasn't someone doing drugs but the sin that we carry compared with him, he's so pure. I just felt I was repulsed by my own sin. In his presence, I felt really bad. And I thought, how could he love someone as disgusting and dirty as me? And I was disgusted with myself, but he did love me and he was full of grace. I think it was grace due to the blood of Jesus who paid for our sins is what it comes down to. But I still felt really dirty and guilty standing there in all my sin. And I thought, I must be a huge disappointment to him. But in standing there with him, it was like he forgot my sins completely. They didn't exist to him. They only really existed to me. So I was trying to kind of, get through that and not feel so bad standing there. I wouldn't have even dreamed of touching him because I would have felt like I would have contaminated him because he was so pure and clean and holy. So then, as we looked over the world, I could see what looked like flashes of light and the tempest of storms moving over the surface of the earth and in the atmosphere. And I could see God looking, he's gazing off kind of into the distance at the earth. And I could see him looking at the flashes and the storms, and that it saddened him. And I realized then that it was not actually storms, but a great war raging between good and evil and the principalities in high places. And, at that time I hadn't read those scriptures so much, but I just knew it from that knowing. And it was an ongoing, never-ending spiritual war for the minds and the souls of his children and of all of creation. And even as he looked on and that Jesus had the victory, it still saddened him to see, because he was looking on to his children that were being won or lost to the enemy. And it was grieving him to look at it. And it seemed like there was a great darkness that was growing and spreading, even amongst so many flashes of light. And I felt the flashes of light were the more the good that was going on and the people that were turning to him. But he did see us as his children, and it really saddened him. So then next, he showed me a woven tapestry or rug. And I realized that the tapestry represented his plan, and he was showing it to me. And I could see the intricate design, and I could see the billions and billions of interwoven threads running through it, and that this was all his design, and that it was a work in progress. I could see that many lives were fully woven, entirely woven in the plan, past lives, present lives, future lives. And some had completed their part thousands of years ago, and other threads were partially woven into the tapestry with long threads hanging out from the tapestry, where they were either going to be woven into the plan, or if things changed, they could be cut short, just snipped and cut, and someone else could be woven in, and that plan could continue according to his will. Well, he showed me my thread, and it was sticking out of the tapestry. So I was at a turning point where I had to decide, what I wanted to do and if I wanted to be a part of the plan. And he could snip it himself, and I could have no choice if he chose. But he was showing me that he wanted me to have a choice, and he wanted me to choose his plan and his will. But that it was my choice. So he hoped to gently guide me along a better path as his beloved daughter, but he would allow me to make that choice in freedom myself. Okay. And he really did. He knew everything. He knew all the hairs on my head. I realized, I was like, that's true. He knows all that stuff. I was surprised. I was like, he really does know it. So he showed me that I have a choice in free will. And I have the ability to make my choices, to make my own mistakes. And I have also the choice to live by faith and to serve in his plan or not. So he would allow me to unalive myself and honor and accept my decision either way. I didn't ask him what the ramifications or where I would go. If I did that, I kind of knew, and I didn't want to know the answer. I knew I would not be up in heaven. So I kind of avoided that. I was like, I'm not asking that question, but I do feel I wouldn't have been there. But the plan was malleable, as sometimes he changed the plan himself. So at that point, I was a little bit, he was saying, he could cut my thread or I could cut my thread and everything would be fine. The plan would go on. His will would be done. It's his plan, not my plan. I really don't. It's like me being in the ocean of water. I can go along with it, but I can't really control it. And that stung me a little bit. My ego was hurt that he could just allow me to cut my thread, or he could cut my thread and everything could go along, kind of without me. I could be replaced so easily. But that was the truth of it, right? And so I felt worse. I wasn't happy about the ego thing, that my thread could be snipped so easily and I could be easily replaced. But I felt even worse that I could hurt and disappoint this loving being, this perfect being who just loved me no matter what. I was really disappointed in myself. And I thought that he wasn't even angry at me, that I was thinking about my choice. He was a little stern, but he wasn't angry. And so I was, even though he was disappointed, I decided I would take a chance. And, well, okay, let me step back. So then I'm looking at this plan, and, I'm young and foolish, I would say. And I had a question, and I knew it was a question that he wasn't going to answer. But I also knew that I came there, and if I went back to Earth and I didn't ask him this question, I couldn't live with myself. I'd be like, I'd regret it that I didn't ask him this question. But I also knew he wasn't going to ask it. I also was a little worried he might smite me if I ask it. So, but I said, I'm going to ask. He hasn't smited me so far. If he didn't smite me so far, maybe he won't smite me for this either. And of course, now I'm also thinking, he can hear you. He's hearing all this stuff, and he hasn't smited you. He knows what you're thinking right now. So I said, okay, I'm going to ask. So I kind of tentatively decided I would take a chance and ask him. So I asked him about his plan and when he would return to Earth to bring it to fruition and the end times. And he wasn't angry. He didn't crush or smite me with his power. And he was powerful. I was like a little ant compared to him. But he politely told me that it was not for me to know, that it was his knowledge alone, and that it would come to pass, and that I didn't have any influence and I couldn't know that. So I thought, okay, I was still ashamed to think that I would disappoint him. And I asked his forgiveness. And I vowed from that point forward that whatever happens in my life, however painful, no matter what, I would never unalive myself, but take my place in his plan, to whatever his plan is, and see it through to the end, to his will. Okay. I also accepted, as he told me, that if I chose to go back to Earth, I would lose the knowledge that, I told you how my consciousness expanded. All that would be taken back. The veil would descend again. I would not know or understand everything. The memories and knowledge would be wiped. Some of it remains clearly, but a small token of it compared to what I knew at that time. And I would have to live my life in faith. And I accepted that. And I thought, I'm honored to be a part of his plan, even not knowing what it was. Not knowing is somehow part of it. I felt like if I knew, it would ruin me either making the choices that I need to make, or that he wants it to be free will. I'm not sure exactly, but not knowing is part of his plan. So while we're all on the earth wondering what's going on, that's part of it. It's just part of the experience that he wants us to have as we grow. So then he instantly, after I'd made that decision, he instantly sent me back to my body on earth. And he also, when he did that, he took all the emotional pain that I had been feeling away. So I had relief from that pain. And I needed it. I was in a bad spot. Now the pain stayed away, no pain, for probably about 3 days. I was so happy not to have all that pain. And then it kind of gradually returned, never to the level that it was at that time before, but then I started feeling emotional pain and stuff again. And I realized that it was something that everyone goes through, and that I just needed to deal with it. But it never rose to the level that it was. I never thought about unaliving myself ever again. And then I guess knowing what I know today about toxic people and relationships, I just think there are these people out there, and maybe spiritual entities, that try to oppress people, and something wanted me to take my life. And I don't know why, but I just kind of feel, and again, this is something that I feel now. I didn't have those feelings then. I didn't know about toxic people and personality disorders or spiritual entities from the negative side, and that they might also be doing that type of oppression. So I guess that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Wow, what a testimony. My goodness. So many follow-up questions. First of all, it's interesting that how your understanding of, when you returned to earth, that all of that knowledge, that revelation was taken away from you because you were meant to live by faith here, which is interesting, right? You have to rely on him to get through this life. That's so interesting. And the question that you asked, that everyone always wants to predict and guess, it's not for us to know, period. That's powerful.
Yeah, and I got the feeling that it could change. He could decide to postpone it or bring it up, or it's when he knows. And but he definitely has, and it's definitely quickening. I feel like it's near, and I've always been watching since that time. I've always been, even as a child, I like reading Revelations and looking at all the signs and things, and so I've been kind of keeping an eye on it. And we're getting to the point that most of them are already in place, right? So especially with the one world government, it seems like
we're
technology
in the right
to be able.
We're
Absolutely. In the right season. I don't know when. I just feel it's close, and I feel that it grieves God to think of losing even an individual of his family. And so that was part of the reason why I did this. I thought maybe I could help someone not unalive themselves, and maybe I could help someone who had some of these questions.
Well, and speaking of that, I recently had a conversation with someone, and they did unalive themselves and ended up in the cave looking up at the gates of heaven, but he was not able to enter because he decided to take his own life, which is interesting. So obviously there are different theories, and God is so merciful, he can meet you in between. But I mean, that's a chance you don't want to take, right? But you knew that if you were to take your own life, you wouldn't be where you were, right? Hey, before we get back to the episode, my father has a free gift for you. So let me explain. For those of you that don't know, my father was an underground minister in Kiev, Ukraine. My father risked his life preaching the gospel on the streets of Kiev, Ukraine, at the time when it wasn't popular or allowed. And he also raised a family of 9 children in the most hostile environment. There's so many lessons that he learned throughout his journey. And for years, I've been begging him. I was saying, Father, please write a book about your life, about your journey. And he would always dismiss it as, who wants to read a book about my life? And I was like, my children, me. And so, you know what? Finally, he sat down, he wrote the book. He did it in like 1 week. I translated the book to English, and both of us, we want you to have this book for absolutely free. And the way to get this book is super simple. Go to Instagram, find me at God's Voice Today, and send me a private message with the word book, and I will automatically send you a link to get it. And now let's get back to the episode. Enjoy.
Yes, and I think that's why I didn't actually do it, is I didn't want to commit that sin because I knew it was wrong. But that was also why I was kind of like, well, God, if you could just do it for me, then it wouldn't be my sin. You would make the decision, and I could just, but that's kind of blasphemous, isn't it? And why would he want to do that, right? But it just shows you how much pain I was in. It was a blasphemy to him for me to be questioning his creation. He purposely made me, and to be saying, well, I don't want to do it anymore, kind of.
Yeah, and I love that illustration, the visual that you were describing, the like the thread, your life being a thread, and that at any moment, look, if you decided to, you don't want to be a part of this, you're replaceable. And but
Yeah, and there
how?
were other threads he did that to.
Mm, so our
Well,
participation is crucial, but he wants us to be part of this process. But if you have free will, if you choose not to, that's a different path you don't want to be on.
definitely, but he wants us to love him freely. He doesn't see it if he forces you to love him or to choose him. He doesn't see it as real love.
Mm. Hmm.
You know what I mean? It's not. Then it's like a slavery thing. You're not free, and he wants us to be free and to choose love.
But it's interesting. So you saw like the thread and what he was putting together. What did it look like? How can you describe it?
Well, it was a red tapestry overall, or a rug, and it was rolled up on one side. Now this is a symbol, right, of the plan. So it was probably about, I'm going to say, about 3 feet wide, and the part that was rolled was probably 10 inches rolled, and part of it was laid out on the table. And these threads were sticking out. And the threads were all sorts of different colors, and again, they were different people, races, creeds. It was, and I could see that and I couldn't see the minute detail on it. I guess I was looking at it in general. Maybe if I zoomed in, I could have seen it better as for like individual lives. But each thread was like an individual life. And if you cut one short, or when you die, then you would take the end of it and kind of wrap it up into a new thread to continue the story going forward. And the part that was, as it was moving towards the edge of the table, like 3 or 4 feet out, you could see that it was still being woven into the plan, and that those threads were less integrated into the design they were still being developed, because they were also required the free will of the people who would be born. But there was a definite plan on the end point and what he wanted to do.
Man,
Does that make sense?
what a beautiful visual that our life is like.
Yeah, it was very beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very beautiful. It was like silk threads. They were very beautiful, the whole thing.
We're co-creating, so to speak. We're part of the process.
Yeah, that's exactly it. He wants us to co-create with him. And I was surprised at that too. I thought, I didn't realize how much that he really wants us to be a part of it.
And you said
that maybe
it was
going
color
forward
red?
too. Yeah, it was red. And I thought that was, to me, it was red kind of like the blood of Jesus. Was why it was red, and that we were all interwoven into that red. The red color was kind of like the basis of the whole thing, like the background color, so to speak, and our threads were interwoven on that. Now, that was just my feeling, but that's what I took from that when I was there. And then all the other threads, they were all different colors, because each person was designed specifically by him to fit into the plan in a very unique way. We're all different. And I found that really interesting, that we all fit perfectly, but we can be completely different.
So my thread is somewhere in that tapestry. That's so cool.
Yes.
I wonder what color it is. Maybe blue. Blue is my favorite color.
Yeah, there's lots of blue in there. Yeah.
Man, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Oh man,
Cool.
I interviewed early on when I started the YouTube channel. I interviewed this lady, and she had an experience. I think she was in a coma during COVID, and she left her body, and Jesus showed her what our prayers look like going up to heaven, like little golden tickets. And so that was an interesting illustration. But then this is kind of cool. That's another illustration. Powerful. Well, when you came back from this experience, did you tell anyone at all?
No, this is the first I've ever told anyone. I never told anyone. I knew they wouldn't believe me. I knew they'd think I was crazy.
What a huge honor. Kelly, this is, wow. This is amazing. Thank you so much for trusting me with your story. I don't take that lightly.
Yeah, thank you for
So you held on to this for years.
Yeah, I'm, as I said, I'm 60-ish now, and this was when I was 17 to 20. I never told anyone about when I was an epileptic, when I had the seizures. I never told anyone any of that. I never told anyone, like, if I had something like the TV turn on and off or any of that, because I was like, no one's going to believe that. They're just going to think you're crazy.
Well, it's interesting that TV turned on at 3 a.m. That's very consistent with all the demonic activity. I was choked at 3 o'clock in the morning by a demon, by a shadow thing, shadow people, whatever they call them, that dark thing. But nothing that Jesus can't beat. That's all that matters. Yeah, intimidation, fear, tactic of the enemy. Fear is such a weak emotion, but it paralyzes people, cripples them. But I'm so glad that you pushed through and persevered. And that man, what do you make of that man? Do you think he was demon possessed?
Yes, I think he did. I definitely think he was demon possessed. As I looked in his eyes, I've had some other experiences along those lines. And when I was younger, I was very much afraid of those sorts of things. And then it's only within the last couple of years, as I've been reading the Bible, that I realized we have all this authority and that we're not supposed to be afraid of things like that. So when I saw it in him, it was something that I had seen before in others, maybe worse. But it just made me mad that here I was. I guess I wasn't angry. I was offended that I had made this decision and that this evil thing was now trying to make me scared so I wouldn't actually do it.
But Kelly, I guarantee you, people that are watching or listening to this right now, they have a story. They want to share it. And they probably had similar experiences, like, because something like this, when it happens to you, there are two choices that you have to, one of the two choices that you have to make. Either you give in to fear and you push back or take a step back, or you push through and persevere. And so my challenge to everyone watching and listening, you have a powerful testimony. Don't be scared. Go to godsvoicetoday.com/call, schedule a call, share it with the world. It's powerful. But another thing that you mentioned that was very interesting, that you guys communicated through thoughts and feelings. And another thing also you mentioned, because that's pretty much my experience when I had a face-to-face encounter with Jesus. And he was amused and he was stern, just like you described him, or just your encounter with God. And I just remember how when I ran up to Jesus, I asked him, "Are you Jesus?" And I knew he was Jesus, but I just wanted to ask just to make sure.
Sure.
And he said, "Yes, I'm Jesus." I said, "Well, if you're Jesus, you know who I am. You should know. You know everything. What's my name?" And he said, "Vladimir Viktorovich Brokenness." And he said it in full. And even like with the way people say pronounced it perfectly. And instantly when I heard that, I just dropped to my knees, start crying like a little baby, because the reality of who I'm speaking to hit me hard. Like, this is Jesus. Like, and he was amused. He was just like, "Wow, all I said was your name and you already believe me." But then he got stern. And I knew that this is not somebody to play games with. And he said, "Hey, I have a message for you." And he said, "You and your wife, you have a calling on your life, but it won't happen unless you work closely together." And back then we were like cats and dogs early on in our marriage. And he's like, and then he said, "Oh, and by the way, the God's Voice Day podcast you want to start." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, what about it?" Like, I was just thinking about it. Yeah. And he said, "Don't worry, I'll help you." And I thought instantly the next day, Kelly, I would wake up and I'd have this show. Almost 10 years later, finally, I held on. I bought godsvoicetoday.com and I held on to it for like 9-10 years. I think I held on to it for a year. I let it expire, and I bought it again. Held on to it for like 8 or 9 years. And
wow.
Yeah, and I was believing that God would help me, because he did. Jesus told me he would help me. But interesting, he was very strong. Almost, I don't want to say a bodybuilder, but I just remember just the way he was built, and stern, but at the same time loving, kind. A lot of interesting attributes. Wow, interesting. So you had some time to process the story, a lot of time. Still super interesting that you never shared with everyone. I get, something so, well, I feel like now day and age, it's easier to talk about these things because with the internet, you hear more of these things. But as you had some time to process everything, what is your one big takeaway from this experience? Why do you think it had to happen to you? And what is your biggest lesson from this?
I guess, I don't have like a strong feeling of what my mission was, and he didn't like speak to me like other times. I think the biggest thing is that I have to move in faith, and that know that he's there, and there's much more going on in this world than we think. It's very easy. Like, I was going to school, and then I'm working on my career and stuff. I was focusing on the world and trying to make my way and make a living, and being lukewarm, but that there's something bigger than all of that, that most of that doesn't matter the way we think it matters here. And it's just kind of easy to be complacent and lose sight of how spiritual and what the plan actually is. I don't consider myself like, I don't go to church, so that's lukewarm, right? I listen to stuff online, and I'm reading my Bible, but there were many years that I wasn't. But time is also, it's like time is different there. Everything, it may feel like years here, and it's an instant there. So I kind of feel like this is a place where we're supposed to learn and grow and make our choice to be with him. But it's very easy. I think complacency might be more from the other side. They don't, you get focused on the flesh and the world, and that's how he gets people to go the other way.
Well, a decision.
So it's deceptive.
You said how we are here to make that firm decision. And I think that, once you get clear, everything clears up. Once you decide, you'll never have to think about it again. I think that's where a lot of people are. That's what lukewarmness is, right? You're in the middle. You're not deciding. You're just like one foot in, one foot out. And I think sometimes it takes a lifetime to finally come to that decision through different trials and tribulations, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right. And I think the trials and tribulations are there. It's like, if you look at the tapestry, okay, so there should be, or even a piece of art, there needs to be the darkest darks to see the lightest lights. The artists don't paint they don't make white by painting a lot of white. They make white by painting the juxtaposition between the light and the dark. And you have to go through that pain to grow. You have to go through that pain to change and maybe become a better person. If all you do is have everything perfect, then you don't really have the faith. You don't really have anything to change. So you're just living kind of in complacency. Does that make sense?
It's interesting, Kelly, because years ago I met up with Howard Storm. He had a near-death experience, and he invited me over to his house. I wrote him an email, and I wasn't far from him, and he invited me to his house, and I will never forget this. I was asking him all these different questions, and he was talking about how he asked Jesus about why is there so much evil in this earth. And his response was interesting because, if you misunderstand it, you may think that it's cold, but it was something to the effect of like contrast, like an artist. Like, how can you know what's good if you don't know what's evil? It's contrast, right? But I mean, you'll say something like, what, you mean to tell me I had to go to this? You're sick. Some people might say that. But I don't know about you, but I learn more in pain than I do in losses than I do in wins. I mean, when I go through trials and tribulations, that's why the Bible says, rejoice when problems come your way. Why should I rejoice? No, rejoice because it's going to make you stronger, better. You don't grow as much when you're, when everything's good. You grow when you're tested.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think also, to your point, that we live in this fallen world. We could change that. There's a lot of things, if we wanted to change it, we could stop focusing on some things. We don't have to have all these wars. We could focus on feeding and helping other people. If the choice, and maybe that's why we're also here. We're supposed to make those choices. We're supposed to be the ones who are guarding and taking care of his planet, and we are choosing not to. We go along with the systems and everything that are in play, and we don't even question it. But the truth is, if we really wanted to change it, we could. Maybe we couldn't change everything, but we could change a lot of things.
That's a good point, Kelly, because that's another thing that Howard told me, because Jesus told him because Jesus, Howard told Jesus, like, well, if when I return to earth, I'll build a shrine for you, this, buildings for you in your honor. And he's like, I don't need any of that. And what he told him to do, and I'm probably missing a lot of details, but basically go and love people. And he's like, how is that? That's easy. Like, how is that going to change anything? And he said, well, when you love your neighbor, they feel the love, then they go love somebody else. And he showed the ripple effect of just small acts of kindness. And he's like, that's so easy. And he said it took him, he thought it would be so easy to do. He said, I'm still trying to be better at that. It's like the hardest thing he had to do in life is return and, love people. But it is interesting because we think in order to change the world, you got to be in some kind of big position, the president or something, or have a lot of money. But my big takeaway from his conversation with Jesus, Howard's conversation with Jesus, is that it's as small as just doing something kind to somebody, showing them love, forgiveness. These small things compound. And it's kind of like when you throw a little rock in the pond, right? The ripples go and they affect the whole pond.
Mm-hmm.
That's a bit.
Yeah,
that's
I definitely,
huge.
I agree with that. It is huge, and it's hard to do. I found forgiveness. I've really been working on forgiveness because it's hard to do, and maybe you don't get along with certain personalities as much as you do others. It's easy when you get along with someone all the time, but if you don't get along with them, and I have to think back how I felt in front of God and how dirty I was, and yet He forgave me, and I need to forgive those other people, and I try to forgive them, and it's very difficult. I try and I keep asking God to help me with that forgiveness.
And Kelly, that's the number one thing that gets people. Number one thing from all the phone calls that I get, number one thing that gets people to hellish experiences is unforgiveness. For some reason, that's the one thing that just completely, I don't know if it opens just a ton of doors for the evil to come in. But when you hold on to unforgiveness, there's something happens. I always like this. I have a bottle of water right here, and unforgiveness or any burden that you hold, it's kind of like, imagine holding a bottle of water in front of you, and it's light at first, right? But the longer you hold on to it, it gets heavier and heavier. And even something as small, just a bottle of water, but over time it gets heavier. And that's how unforgiveness, all these secrets that we hold on to, all these burdens, it weighs you down, wears you out. And that's why we are to come to Him. We are to give Him our problems. And I always say the freest person in the room is the one with no secrets. You just sleep better at night. A lot of times people struggle at night. They don't sleep is because they have too many secrets, maybe too much unforgiveness, maybe too much fear and worry. But imagine if you just, and again, easier said than done, right? Takes a lifetime.
Yeah, I try to get it to God, but I'm just getting to that point now where I can really do all that, and I still struggle with it, and I still pray that He helps me out with it, because I think he loves them just as much as He loves me, and He wants them to come to Him as well.
Kelly,
and I don't want to go the other way because of unforgiveness either.
Yeah,
or pride,
Well, I think once at least most people, some people don't even know that they are dealing with this, but the fact that you are aware of it and you're working towards that, that's a huge step in the right direction. Some people live all their lives and they're so blinded to the things that they hold on to and how much trouble it brings their way. But before we take this, before we close, before we disconnect, you've been so generous with your time, by the way. Thank you so much. I'm curious about that man that you saw during your seizures. Have you seen him since then? And who do you think? No,
I only saw him when I had the seizures, and I'm not sure exactly who he was. I got the impression that he was either an angel, or because his name was Charles, I didn't know this at the time, but on my grandfather's side of the family, Charles is a family name. And we have so many Charleses in the family. And I didn't know that at the time. My cousin was Chuck. Well, that's a form of Charles. My uncle was Charles. My grandfather was Charles. His grandfather was Charles. So it's a family name. So I kind of wonder if it was someone back in the day who was in the family who was just there kind of acting as an angel to supervise me. We didn't talk. I was a little kid. He was doing things like we were playing jacks. He was showing me how to dribble the basketball and things like that. But he always told me that everything was all right and that I was going to be okay. So he wanted me to feel, and I just accepted it. So that's who I think he was, but I'm not absolutely sure.
Did you guys speak kind of thoughts and emotions like you did with God, or was it mainly actual audible voice?
It was thoughts, but it wasn't that emotion that I would feel with God. It was thought to thought. And he was very gentle and everything with me. But again, he wasn't sharing great secrets. I was a child. It was just, he was just really there to comfort me. And I felt he was there kind of like to supervise me. I don't know if he was keeping me safe or, he wanted to make sure that I made it back okay. I don't really know, but he was always there.
Wow. And
I felt comforted to see him. I felt like he was a friend. Every time when I would have a seizure, I wasn't worried about it. I was like, oh, I'm going to go see Charles again. And we'll play some baseball or, play some jacks or sit in the field and pick flowers.
What a testimony, Kelly. I'm so honored that you decided to share it on my show. Thank you so much for that. And for everyone watching and listening, is there anything you want to say to them in closing?
I would say just be careful with things like Reiki and things like that. There's some very evil things that are involved in that behind the scenes. And just, I would say, I would say read the Bible, because just in the last couple of years, it's really opened my eyes to the spiritualness of life and what's really going on, that I didn't get that when I was younger. The messages that I read when I was younger, I guess I was not at the stage where my experiences could understand them. So I took it more as like, you will do this, you will not do that. And it is a plan. Everything's in there. It's kind of like a cheat sheet. So I would say do that.
And for those that, let's say, do want to read the Bible, but they have a hard time starting, they don't even know where to start. What would you, like when you were starting reading the Bible, what helped you stay consistent?
Well, now what I'm doing is, when I was younger, I would read the books that interested me. I really like Revelations and Ezekiel and Daniel. I liked all the end time stuff, the drama of it. And so I started with what interested me. But now, as I'm older, I picked a point. I had read quite a bit when I was younger. I picked a point, and I'm just, every day I'm reading a chapter or two a day and trying to understand it, and kind of asking the Lord to help me, because I'm not always understanding everything, but I try and look up stuff that I don't understand, and not rush through it, but just kind of every day. And it's interesting, I may be having a day where I'm doing something and I have questions. And almost every time I have something where I have questions, it'll be funny where that day, all of a sudden I'll be reading about it and I'll be like, I was just asking that question and here's the answer. So it's really funny.
It's a living book. It truly is. Well, Kelly,
really
I would
is.
love to have you on the main show. I'll send you the link. Pray about it, and
okay.
We'll stay in touch. Sounds good. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Okay.
Really enjoyed this.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I hope this helps someone.
God bless. Take care. Hey, thank you so much for watching. If today's episode spoke to you, share with someone who needs to hear it. And if you had a supernatural encounter of your own, I'd love to hear it. Just go to godsvoicetoday.com/call to schedule your call. And I'll see you in the next episode. It should be coming up right here on the screen.